person of purpose needs to answer very pertinent questions related to their purpose pursuit and their finances, money, centrally. If we will not take the bull by its horns, I'm talking about the personal financial bull by its horns, it doesn't matter how rosy, how cute your purpose is, you're gonna run ground. Money is important, money is critical. So we've got to put it in perspective as early as possible. Remember, money is about behavior, is about character, is about patterns. It is not about miracles and events. Today, we look further at another question that a person of purpose needs to ask in terms of their finances. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Life Signatures podcast with Lawrence Namale. Lawrence is a life coach, author, and keynote speaker who loves to tackle different topics on purpose, productivity, and resilience. His mission in life is to awaken all your boundless possibilities available in you. Life Signatures podcast is dedicated to bring to reality every single person who knows that deep down in their gut, there's got to be more to life than this. And now, here is your host, Lawrence Namale.
So having come this far, I think we've laid enough groundwork for us to be able to work on the next question about finances on a personal level for anyone who is pursuing a purpose. Of course, you know already that you cannot do this without money, even when you are serving God in God's vineyard, quote unquote. You need money. And I know there are very many misgivings out there about people, men of the cloth, men of God, and how many people are starting their own churches here and there, ostensibly just to collect money. I remember sitting in an organization somewhere and where folks were talking about a particular church. They were discussing how the people were collecting money and so on and so forth. And I mean, without any knowledge about that church. That church, by the way, is the only church, one of the fewest in the world that have their books audited every year and they're open for scrutiny. But these guys, even that being the case, these guys were saying that church is just collecting money, a lot of money, and they're just giving money to Israel. They're just giving money. There are very many misgivings when money is involved. And a person of purpose being a spiritual thing, a person of purpose might want to shy away from money when it comes to that. And I'm telling you, you don't need to be holy when it comes to money. Let me tell you this, money is not a bad thing, neither is it a good thing. It takes the form or the format of the owner. Have you ever watched the movie called The Mask? You remember The Mask? What's the name of this guy? Jim Carrey. Remember Jim Carrey and The Mask? Whenever Jim Carrey will put on the mask, he will turn into this fun-loving, exuberant individual, who is just pleasant and creative, positively. But when the villain puts on the mask, turns on to be villain. That's what money is. It takes your shape. If you are a spender for money, when money shows up, I remember telling you a story on this episode when we started on this series. It's a talk I was listening to, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't continue listening to it because I was so mad. A certain guy got money through an event, I think. Maybe he won a lottery or whatever it is. It was 1 million Kenya shillings. This guy decided to take a trip He crossed to Uganda, then to Rwanda, then to Burundi. 14 days later, he did not have money to go back to Kenya. What did money do? Can you blame money? Honestly, can you blame money as far as that is concerned? No, you cannot. Money took the form of the fool who had it. Or it can take the form of a wise person who has it. The person that we need to work on is you. And that's where your purpose comes in. That you need to channel your money towards your purpose and towards your life. You need to balance between paying your bills and living out your purpose. Money has got to be channeled in those two fronts at all times. Every time there is income in your life, we've talked about income, I don't want to go back there. Every time there is income in your life, the outgo must be determined by those two things. One, your purpose, your main core purpose, the reason for existence in life, number one. And number two is got to be channeled through the idea of paying bills and paying Caesar what belongs to Caesar. In other words, paying taxes. Because if you don't pay Caesar, if you don't pay your landlord, if you don't pay bills, you don't have peace to pursue your purpose. But if you're only living to pay bills, your purpose becomes scrawny. It dies. It becomes so weak that you don't even recognize it. And the rest of your life becomes paying the bills. And you think that as long as I'm going to have peace of mind, you are not created ostensibly just to have peace of mind because you've paid your bills. You are created to do something, to fulfill a particular calling, a mandate, a purpose, create an impact, bring a contribution, make things happen. That's why you're here. And paying bills is just a fraction of the whole equation of being alive. So money becomes a critical equation. So the first question we've been answering is income. What is my income? You can review the past 2 episodes. We talked passionately about the subject of income. Today, let us introduce another question. This question is the opposite of income. Remember, we've said 2 things. That there is always going to be an event and there is always going to be a process. It is interesting that the guys who are looking for money to come to them in terms of an event, let's say a miracle, a lottery, and so on and so forth, they also use that money in terms of an event. In other words, they spend. Once. There's a saying in Swahili saying, maskini akipata matako hulia mbwata. Very graphic. When a poor man earns or gets some money, their buttocks pain them, itch them. They cannot sit still until the money is spent. There is that, and then there is processes, which we're going to talk about. 2 things with money. An event, whether it's income or outgo, or a process. Income or outgo. So today, the opposite of income is expenses. And I know financial gurus will say, hey, hold on a minute, it's not. But this is my podcast, so I can do what I can. The question that you and I need to know is this. By the way, if I asked you today, this is the end of January 2022, as you're listening to this podcast, how much have you already spent on a particular category of an expense? How many categories of expenses do you even have? The guy who has pertinent information about those is a guy who knows not to be a slave to their money, but the other way around. They are dictating where the money is going to go. They are determining where the money is going to go. They have several buckets that they are using for that. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the most default mode for the human being with money, I don't care whether you're born again, whether you're Muslim, Hindu, Christian, whatever. I don't care whether your God is Jesus or it's Muhammad or it's Krishna or you don't have a God. As long as you're a human being, your default mode with money is to spend it. But I've learned that if we delay spending, we tend to save quite a bit. First, we realize that we probably do not need to make the purchase if you delay spending. Second, we realize that we could be a better deal. We could have a better deal elsewhere if you delay the purchase. Have you ever heard this buyer's remorse? Comes in two ways. One, the thing that you bought is crap, but before you bought it, you couldn't settle down. It was eating you up. You agreed with greed, right? You couldn't settle down until your greed was satisfied, and then in a splitting second, the greed has been satisfied. You've bought whatever it is that you wanted to buy. It's crap. That's number one. The other way buyer's remorse comes is you realize that, I need it, but I've paid 3 times higher than I could have paid if I delayed my purchases somewhere. But anyway, we also need to ask, when we're delaying these expenses, we need to ask, is it necessary? Personal financial planners will tell you need to distinguish between needs and wants. Is that smartwatch a need or is it a want? Is it necessary? Can you live without it comfortably? It's amazing. Some people think that they cannot live comfortably without a PS2, without a wristwatch, without a 48-inch TV, if there is such a thing. And yet they don't use the TV 24 hours, 7 days. If you drew a pie chart on the amount of time that they use every single day, you find that the measly time allocated for the 48-inch TV that they spend top dollar buying, it doesn't make sense at all. So do you need to make that purchase? Do you need to make that purchase? Do you need to make it immediately? Is it necessary? Is it because you want to be like the Joneses? Is it because you want to be like your neighbor? Do you feel like you're not man enough because you don't have a TV? Do you feel like you're not man enough because you don't have a car? It's about your identity. It's about what you think you are. See, if I can strip myself of all these appendages, TVs and nice iPhones and great podcasting equipment and the cars and the curtains and all these things, appendages, if I can strip myself of all of these things and I am still safe, comfortable in my own skin, then I can own anything that I want. But if my identity is dependent upon those things that can perish, they have a perishable due date on them, every single one of them, then there is a problem with my expenses. Because I am not just spending to spend, I am spending to identify myself, and that, my friend, is a bottomless pit. It doesn't have an end. You will always spend. If your identity is not fixed, you will always want to spend. In fact, people spend top dollar trying to sort out their identity, and the more they spend, the more miserable they become, because they realize, hey, wait a minute, someone else has a better shoe, someone else has a better handkerchief. It's a vanity of vanities. And people end up with Swahilis sharing in Kenya, that broken Swahili, we call it kiwaru. That means you have this jealousy that is like a lump in your chest, not chest, in your neck, and as much as you try to swallow that painful lump of jealousy, it ain't going, because your neighbor has a better one. And you don't know where you're going to get money to buy an even better one than that neighbor. And maybe you're going to get the money and buy a better one than your neighbor, only to turn to the left and you see that another neighbor has an even better one, 14 times better than the cheap thing that you bought. vanity of vanities, expenses going toward filling our small egos, feeding our small egos. And they will never be satisfied. Who to you, if your expenses are ego-tied, ego-related, identity-related? Look, I'm not saying that we become miserable in the things we own, that we buy the most miserable shoe and the most miserable haircut, we have the most miserable whatever. Listen, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you can do without it and you're comfortable, that your identity hasn't decreased because you don't have X, Y, Z, you're good to go. But if your identity is commensurate to what you have to buy, you can't buy your identity enough. Let me tell you, the price for your identity is invisible. It is not empirical. It is in the divine. It is invisible, the unseen. And there is no money you can put enough on your identity. You ask Robin Williams, who committed suicide, this a multi-millionaire comedian, loved all over the world, acting in movies and so on. But the identity is not something that you can buy with money. So watch your expenses. I'm going to come and talk again about the expenses. But I'm telling you this. The more you spend to please, the more you are sinking into a bottomless pit of expenditure. Tomorrow, we continue talking about expenses, but until then, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Signatures Radio. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to Life Signatures Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or visit our website at lifesignatures.libsyn.com. Life Signatures Radio, fresh, clean, and inspiring.